Next, your boy Netanyahu approves a plan to occupy the Gaza Strip.
There's major news coming out of Israel tonight, where in a matter of hours, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is expected to urge his security cabinet to back a full military takeover of the Gaza Strip. That's according to Israeli media reports that a source tells CNN are accurate. Senior officials close to the Prime Minister are quoted as saying the die is cast, we're going for full conquest. If Israel's military commander doesn't agree, he should resign. My source tonight served as the U.S. ambassador to Israel under President Obama. Dan Shapiro is here. And thank you, Ambassador. I wonder what you make of what this is going to look like if Netanyahu goes forward with this.
Well, Caitlin, I certainly hope these reports are not true. What is described in those reports is essentially Israel continuing the war into a full occupation of Gaza. This is really to achieve the goals of the most extreme members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet, which is to reoccupy and ultimately resettle Gaza, annex it to Israel, perhaps ethnically cleanse the Palestinian population. That's not what is needed right now. Maybe this is just a feint to try to get Hamas back into negotiations on the release of the hostages, but I certainly hope it's not true. If it is followed through, what it's going to mean is more dead hostages. We just saw 2 hostages that Hamas is sadistically starving and dig their own graves in tunnels. And where there are 20 still alive, they're going to die. More Palestinian civilians are going to die. More Israeli soldiers are going to die. Israel, which is already experiencing significant isolation internationally, is going to see that.
Rightfully so. They're fucking committing a genocide, bro. They're getting all this fucking, they deserve it, dude. It's not even a question. It's not even a question.
Deepen. But no Arab states are going to come help with the day after in Gaza, which was what really needed. And President Trump can forget about his dreams of a Saudi-Israeli normalization deal.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Just so you guys know, the Saudis have pretty much come out and said if the Palestinians don't get a state, the Saudis are not going to join the Abraham Accords. What are the Abraham Accords? The Abraham Accords, guys, okay, it's an agreement between Israel and several Muslim majority countries, to recognize Israel as a sovereign state, right? As you guys know, one of the political chess pieces that worked for Palestine was Israel would not be recognized by the Arab world and the Muslim world until they recognized a Palestinian state. And for many years, this was the status quo and it helped. But when Trump introduced the Abraham Accords in 2020, a bunch of Muslim countries actually started to recognize Israel. Right? And right before October 7th happened, guys, interestingly enough, no one ever talks about this, but Saudi Arabia was supposed to join the Abraham Accords. Now, a big reason why Hamas invaded on October 7th was the Abraham Accords, the Al-Aqsa Masjid being destroyed for the Temple Mount, the violent occupation of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, the expansion of the legal settlements, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, making Jerusalem as the capital, which many presidents have talked about doing it, but Donald Trump was the only one. So Donald Trump actually expedited quite a bit of the things that stimulated the aggression from Hamas. He killed Qasem Soleimani in 2020. He destroyed the nuclear deal. He put the IRGC on the terrorist watch list, foreign terrorist organization. He sanctioned the fuck out of Iran. Well, Iran is the biggest backer of Hamas. If you hurt Iran, you also hurt Hamas. Then on top of that, the situation with the mosque, the Temple Mount being built on top of it, getting the cows, getting the Saudi Arabians involved in the Abraham Accords, the occupation, all of these different things led to October 7th. Again, I'm not justifying it. I'm just explaining to you guys why they attacked. Because people tend to run around and say, oh, they're just a bunch of savages. They want to kill a bunch of people. Well, they're a lot more methodical than you think. Also, Hamas understands that they're an inferior military. So they know for them to be able to get the political leverage that they need to kidnap civilians. So not only did they respond on October 7th for all the things that I told you guys, they also understood that for us to get our hostages back, because there's thousands of Palestinians that are sitting in Israeli jails, by the way, guys, with no due process. Kids, women, children, all of it. They're sitting in Israeli prisons where people are being
redacted.
I've shown you guys proof of this already. All of these different reasons, I named like what, 7 or 10 different reasons? This is why the October 7th attacks happened.
Expanding the Abraham Accords. So I certainly hope these reports are not accurate.
So yeah, Saudi Arabia is not going to join the Abraham Accords. And another reason too why Hamas had to attack before the Saudi Arabia enjoyed is because in the Muslim world, guys, Saudi Arabia has quite a bit of influence. I forgot to mention this. So Saudi Arabia is unofficially the leader of the Muslim world. And the reason why is because you got Mecca, you got Medina, the Kaaba is there, right? When people do their Hajj, their pilgrimage, when Muslims pray, they pray towards the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has probably the most influence in the Muslim world, especially Sunni Islam. So by Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, that would be a serious problem for Hamas, because now Israel's getting what they want, which is recognition from Saudi Arabia, without answering the Palestine question. That's very important. Very important. A country like Saudi Arabia, with the type of influence it has in the Muslim world, if Saudi Arabia joined the Abraham Accords, the Palestinians would effectively lose any type of political leverage that they had. So they knew by invading Israel, kidnapping hostages, there would be a retaliation from Israel, and in the middle of a conflict between Hamas and the IDF, there's no fucking way the Saudi Arabians would recognize Israel. Give me ones that all make sense. It's really complex, bro, and I never see mainstream media ever talk about this shit. They never list out the grievances and why this shit happened. They just say, this is why Hamas did it because they're terrorists or whatever, which I'm not disputing that. But I do think it's important to really understand the history, to know what your enemies are doing and why they do the things that they do. But it's like Western media goes, la, 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 we don't care. And they don't tell you guys the truth about why they attacked. The Red Heifers, Alaska flood, Abraham Accords, this never gets mentioned in fucking mainstream media. Ever. The occupation.
Yeah, I mean, those images of the emaciated hostages are just, they're devastating to look at, and also to think of what this would mean for the Palestinians after so long that the war has been happening. And this reminded me of, obviously, just recently, a few months ago, when President Trump was talking about the United States taking over over Gaza, basically, and being in charge of it. I asked him about that at a press conference. I want to remind everyone what he told me. Just to follow up on what you were saying about the Gazans leaving Gaza and going to other countries. One, where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision a world, people living there.
Oh, man. So this was really bad. I remember when Trump had this press conference and he said that we're going to take over Gaza. If you guys notice, he hasn't said that shit in a long-ass time for obvious reasons. Wildly unpopular. The base was so pissed off.
The world's people, I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place. I think the potential and
Translation, we're going to go ahead and turn Gaza into the next fucking Dubai, an international city where people can go ahead and travel, and it'll be run by the United States and Israel, and we're going to have beachfront property. It's going to be beautiful, baby. We're going to start getting into the game of Middle Eastern tourism to compete with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. That's what he really wants to say. We're going to ethnically cleanse these fucking Gazans and get them the fuck up out of here so that we can go in and build resorts here. But he doesn't want to say that, obviously.
the Gaza Strip is unbelievable.
And just so you guys know, his right-hand man, Steve Witkoff, the guy that's his special envoy, negotiator, that fucking guy's involved in real estate too. And he also has strong invested interests in the Gulf states, Qatar, Israel, etc. And he would also benefit from Gaza being turned into a fucking resort town.
Unbelievable.
If Netanyahu does go through with this, what do you think the U.S.'s role could look like?
Well, I think President Trump bears a fair bit of responsibility for the situation we're in, with a war that seems to continue without end, a ceasefire that broke down, a hunger crisis that took hold in Gaza, with people literally starving, hostages languishing without any hope of being freed. When he announced his vision of the United States taking over Gaza and sending all the Palestinians out and building luxury hotels on the beach. That was not a realistic vision. It was not even a serious vision, but it did embolden and empower the most extreme members of the Israeli cabinet who really do want to empty Gaza of its Palestinian population and take it over. So
100%. That was the plan the whole time, bro. That's why they destroyed like 80 to 70, I think between 70 to 90% of the infrastructure in Gaza is destroyed. They did that so they can make it uninhabitable. And also, I mentioned this to you guys earlier, another reason too why they're starving them and killing them and making this this whole experience unbearable is because they want them off the land, chat. They know that if they make the place inhabitable, miserable, they're going to be more open to what? Hey, bro, oy vey, you want to go to Libya? You want to go to Egypt? You want to go to Jordan? Oy vey, as they fucking rub their palms together. The more miserable they make the Gazans, the easier it will be to get them out of Gaza and ethnically cleanse them and take over the land. I've told you guys this before. I'll say it again. Gaza is on prime fucking real estate, chat. Okay? For those of you that aren't familiar, I'll show you better than I can tell you. Look at this shit. Uninhabitable, bro. Completely destroyed. Infrastructure cooked. Right? Look, it's right on a beach, chat. Very nice, isn't it? Could you imagine if you had like a resort that you could put there? American, Western? Yeah. It's on prime fucking real estate, chat. So now we know why the Israelis are so interested in this fucking land.
He also signed off on a terrible, sorry.
Well, you mentioned what the government wants. The Israeli media tonight is reporting the IDF is opposed to this, and I just what does happen if Israel's military leaders say we don't support what you're going to do here?
75% of the Israeli public in every poll says they want the war to end and get all the hostages home. A large number of very senior former Israeli security figures just announced today their call to end the war and get the hostages home. And we know the Israeli military leadership feels that the military is overstretched and that the costs and the military gain, the costs of doing this operation deep into Gaza are too high and the military gains are too little given how much Hamas has already been degraded. So when President Trump gives signals that he's open to it, when President Trump gives signals that he's open to suspending aid shipments as he did, when he doesn't use the leverage he had after he struck the Iranian nuclear facilities to say to Prime Minister Netanyahu, it's time to bring the war to an end, he bears some responsibility, and we need him and his envoy, Steve Witkoff.
Yeah, well, the problem is that Steve Witkoff and Trump are owned by the Jews, so they're not going to do anything, bro. They're not going to do shit. Not surprised.
To actually get Hamas,
like, it is what it is.
Hamas and Israel to the table for an end of conflict deal that brings all hostages home and gets aid surging into Gaza.
Former Ambassador Dan Shapiro. We'll see what happens, obviously, when Israel wakes up in a few hours. Thanks so much for joining tonight.
Thank you.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is planning to push his security cabinet for a full military takeover of the Gaza Strip. That, according to reports in Israeli.
All right, before we get into the second part, let me read some chats. Landgear95, how do I join Telegram? Click the link.
Media. Now, a source tells CNN that decision is not yet final. But let's get straight to CNN political and global affairs analyst Barak Ravid. Barak, walk people through what's actually here. What's your sense of what's real and kind of what's still to be determined, if you will?
I think a lot of it is to be determined. I think Netanyahu is kind of stuck in a situation where the negotiation over the partial hostage deal went into a stalemate. It failed. And now the only way forward is to go back to some expanded military action in Gaza, because at the moment he's not interested in really cutting a deal that will end the war. But on
very fucking important, guys. So I was debating a fucking Zionist the other day on this shit, and this was literally my main argument when I said, yo, the Israelis don't want to end the war because Hamas wants to end the war. Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire. The Israelis refuse to have a permanent ceasefire. That is why the war is still going on, chat. They could get all the hostages back right fucking now if they agree to a permanent ceasefire. They don't want a permanent ceasefire. Why? Because they don't really give a fuck about getting rid of Hamas. They want the Palestinians gone. That's the real reason why they don't want the permanent ceasefire. They want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. That is the God honest fucking truth, chat.
On the other hand, the IDF tells him that any expanded military operation in Gaza now will be in areas where the IDF hasn't operated yet. And the reason it hasn't operated there is because there are hostages in those areas. And the IDF stressed several times to the cabinet that such an operation in those areas would likely lead to those hostages getting hurt. This is why it is such a hard decision. Netanyahu is at least trying to put out trial balloons that his direction is to go to this expanded military operation. But as you said, as far as I know, a decision hasn't been made. The Security Cabinet will only convene on Thursday, and this is the body that has the legal authority to take such a decision.
Barak, you've been doing a ton of great reporting on kind of where the hostage negotiations stand, where they've broken down, what the current goals are or are not, depending on who you talk to in this moment. Break that down for people. What's your sense of where they stand and kind of between the U.S., Israel, and Hamas at this point?
So I think the negotiations are stuck. And they're stuck because at the end of the day, it's all about the question of what's more important to Netanyahu. Is it more important to defeat Hamas, something that defeated militarily, something that he hasn't been able to do for 22 months? Or is it more important to bring the hostages back? Those two goals cannot live together. As much as Netanyahu says they can, they cannot. And the question is, I think, when you have to ask yourself which direction this thing is going to go, the answer is not necessarily right now in Jerusalem. The answer is also in Washington, because President Trump is discussing this matter with his team for a few days now. And his envoy, Steve Witkoff, came back from the region and briefed him about the situation. And until now, in the last 6 months, since Trump assumed office, he basically went along with anything Netanyahu wanted to do. It led us to this moment where we're at a deadlock. And if Netanyahu now expands the war, in my personal opinion, this would lead to another year of war in Gaza. And President Trump needs to think carefully whether he wants the first half of his presidency to be completely hijacked by the war in Gaza that he himself said he is going to end.
It's already hijacked this presidency. He's already went to war with the Houthis and bombed the Iranians for these fucking Jews, bro.